Hi, this is Mike McCrease. Welcome back to Advanced Photoshop. And today we're going to continue learning about professional portrait retouching techniques. This time we're going to work with a bridal portrait, and normally with a picture of professional quality we would shoot it in camera raw, and you would end up with a really high resolution image that would be 300 pixels per inch or more. Due to the problems of submitting such huge files through the internet, we're going to keep ours a little bit smaller, though it is going to be a larger image than we have normally worked with. But oftentimes my personal photographs that I work with end up being 500 megs or larger. It can get to be really huge depending on the quality that you need to print these out. But let's go ahead and open up the picture called Christie.jpg. Again, it's just a JPEG image. If I were doing professional work, it would be in camera raw. But let's go ahead and open that one up. So here's our image. And just to show you, I'm going to press Control, Alternate, and I, or Command Option I if you're on the Macintosh, to give you our image size. And you see that this particular image is 7 by 10 inches and is 240 pixels per inch. At this resolution, I could print it out on an inkjet printer, but still wouldn't be as high quality. I'm just trying to keep the file size, as I mentioned, a bit smaller, just so that we could submit these through Blackboard without any significant problems. But it is a larger file than normal. And it's a nicely done photograph, professionally shot in a studio with studio strobes, and the composition is good. I think there's a few lighting problems. Personally, I think that there's too much contrast. The shadows are too dark. And we've got some retouching to do on it. We'll just do a quick tour here. We probably want to reduce these wrinkles underneath the eyes. A few blemishes on the face we'd like to take care of. There's a little mole down here on our collarbone. And we want to enhance the eyes and make them look really nice, and a few other such features. I'm going to start out by resolving my contrast situation. I'll go to my Layers panel, and let's create an adjustment layer for curves. You see it based on our histogram, we got a nice full range of values there, but we want to open up those shadows without affecting the highlights. I'm going to start just moving my cursor down over here in this lower quadrant of the histogram and click on this diagonal line, and we're going to pull that up. Now, a little goes a long ways with curves, so I'm not going to overdo it. I just want to open up those shadows a bit like this. Now my highlights are starting to get a little bit too bright, so I put my cursor up here in the upper right quadrant of my histogram, grab that line, I'm going to pull that down a little bit, back down to their original position. So that keeps these highlights from getting any brighter, but you can see down here we've taken these lower values and opened those up a little bit, and you can toggle this on and off and see the difference, and I think that you'll agree that that's a much better image. But just as a reminder, a little goes a long ways. Notice how very little I moved that up there. Now when I did so, I think it made the eyes just a little bit too bright. I don't want those to be lighter. So over in my Layers panel, I'm going to click on the layer mask that is created whenever I create an adjustment layer. I'll go to my paintbrush tool and use black paint, and we're just going to paint over those eyes. So we're masking the eyes off so that they are not affected by that curves adjustment layer. Next thing I'm going to do is do some basic retouching on the image. I'll zoom out here a little bit. I'll create a new layer, which I will call Retouch. All my retouching will be placed on this layer. I'll go to the Spot Healing Brush tool, and I'm just pressing J to get to the Healing Brush tools, and you can cycle through those tools by pressing Shift J. Make certain that you're on the little Band-Aid looking tool with a little dot next to it. And then we're going to come up to our options bar here at the top and make certain that you choose Sample All Layers. I'll zoom in to that mole on her collarbone, and we'll take care of that. Gone, just like that. And because it's on a separate layer, I can turn that on or off. Come back and correct it anytime I need to if I didn't do a good job. Let's go over to her face and clean up any imperfections there. The smaller your brush, the finer you can get in there and do the detailing. And just clean up anything that you think shouldn't be there. There's some hair over her eyes there. Kind of want to get rid of some of that. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Next, I'm going to take care of these wrinkles underneath her eyes, and I'm going to use the patch tool to do that. So I'll press Shift J a couple of times till we get to our patch tool, and just like we've done before, we're going to lasso in this part of the eye right there, and I'll just drag that down here to her cheek and release it, and you've got a nicely blended in eye, and I think you'll agree that looks so much better. Let's come over here and do the same thing with this one. Perfect. Now let's do a little bit of work on the teeth. I want to brighten up those teeth and remove any stains that might be there. So I'm going to select them. I can use the lasso tool or the quick selection tool. I'm really fond of the quick selection tool, so I will choose that. Zoom in so we can see a little bit better. And we'll just select the teeth. Now you see that my selection is bled over into other parts of the picture, so I'll hold down the alternate or option key, and we will just click with our brush barely inside those areas that we want to remove from the selection, and that will take care of that. Okay, so our teeth are selected pretty well there. I'm going to feather my selection, so I'll go to the Refine Edge button on the top of our options bar, and we're just going to set the feathering to 3 pixels just to soften that selection edge up. Click OK. And then I'll create an adjustment layer for hue and saturation. In my layers panel, I want to make certain first of all that I'm at the top of my layer stack, and then I create my hue and saturation adjustment layer. And here I'm going to pull the saturation of the teeth down a bit to remove any stains. And then I'll take the lightness slider and I'll bring that up, probably just about 10%. Not a lot. But you can see how, having done so, brightens the teeth up without making them look ridiculously white, because teeth aren't actually white. And we've removed kind of the yellow stains on the corners of the teeth, so that looks pretty nice. Next we're going to go on to the eyes. And we'll spend quite a bit of time working with the eyes because they're the most important part of any portrait. Let's go back to our background layer. And I'm going to select each eye and jump it to a new layer and enlarge the eye, because when you enlarge the eyes, especially on a female subject, it makes them more appealing. So background layer is active. Let's go to our lasso tool. I prefer the polygonal lasso. Gives me a little more control. And we're going to lasso in the eyes. I want to get the eyelashes, but not the eyebrow, so I'll be careful about that. Once I've got my selection made, I'll go to the Refine Edge button at the top, and we're going to feather that 10 pixels. Then, again, making certain you're on your background layer, we're going to copy that to a new layer. I'm pressing Control Alternate J or Command Option J on the Macintosh. We'll give this a name. We'll call it right eye. It's always best to label your layers, because once we get several of them created, if we know what's on each layer, it's going to make our editing job much easier. Okay, back to the background layer. We're going to lasso in the other eye. Feather that 10 inches or 10 pixels. And put that on a new layer. We'll call that one left eye. Now I'll go to each of the eyes and use my free transform tool, and I'm going to enlarge it 107%. Up here in my width field at the top, I'll set that to 107 and the height to 107, and press enter or return a couple of times. And this is before, and this is after. When you use this technique, you want to keep the magnification, or the enlargement rather, to between 103 to 107%. You give it much larger than that, then it looks a little fake. And because we feathered our edges, it blends in very nicely with our background layer. So let's go back to the right eye and do that one. Free transform, width to 107%, height to 107. Press return 2 times, before and after. Now let's brighten the eyes up a little bit. Let's go to the top of our layer stack, so make certain that your hue and saturation layer is active. And let's create a dodge and burn layer there. Control Alternate and New Layer button, or Command Option if you're on the Mac. We're going to call this Dodge and Burn. And I'm going to set the blending mode to overlay, and I'm going to fill it with the overlay neutral color 50% gray just by putting a check mark in this box, and click OK. I'll zoom in on the eye a bit. What I'm going to do is lighten up the irises of each eye, and I'm going to do that opposite the catch light. This is our catch light right here, this little light that comes from the studio strobe reflecting in her eye. So I'll go to my paintbrush tool, make certain that my foreground color is set to white. I'm going to set my opacity of my brush to 10%. Make certain that you're using a soft edge brush, and we'll drop our brush size down. And opposite that catch light, I'm just going to click and drag a little bit, maybe a couple or 3 times, just to kind of brighten that up over there. Before and after. Let's move over to the other eye and do the same thing. Now I want you to notice how small her pupils are. If the pupils are large, it makes the eyes much more appealing. So we're going to enlarge those now. I'm going to create a new layer called Pupils. I'll go ahead and put that at the top of my layer stack. I'll zoom in to her right eye, it's the one on our left. And I'm going to go to my elliptical marquee tool. I'll set my feathering up here to 3 pixels. Now I could also set my feathering by going into the refine edge options once I made my selection, but this is just another way of feathering. I'm going to move my cursor right over the center of that pupil right there, and holding my Shift and Alt key, I'm going to click and drag out like this. Make that nice and large, probably about like that. Nice selection around the pupil. I'm going to go to my eyedropper tool, and I'm going to sample the pupil color. I don't want to use black because this is actually not a pure black, and if I used pure black it would be a little fake. You can now go to your foreground color and you see that it is indeed not a pure black, otherwise the little color picker would be down over here in the corner. It's actually a very dark purple. And I'm going to fill it, my selection, with my foreground color. And because we had feathered the edge, it's nice and soft. I can deselect at this point. Now when I created my new pupil, it covered up the catch light. So I'm going to retrieve that now, and I'm going to do that using the blend if slider. So let's go to our layer properties. Again, I'm just double clicking on the layer there to open that up. Go to the blending options, and I'm going to go down here to the bottom where it says underlying layer, and I'll drag the highlight slider to the left. Let me get this out of the way so we can see what's happening here. I'm going to drag the underlying layers highlight slider to the left until that catch light comes back. Now I don't want to bring up that other stuff that you're seeing coming over there in the 7 o'clock position, so we just want to make certain that we get just the catch light like that. Now it has a really rough edge on that, so I will Option or Alt click on that slider, and I'm going to click and drag the right side of it back to the right just to soften that edge up. About like that. And click OK. Then I'll go to my selection tool, and I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key, and I'm going to click and drag that pupil over to the other eye. By holding down the Option key with my selection tool, it copies it over there. And it also generates a new layer. It's also copied my blend if settings, so I don't have to redo those. Now the pupil is a little bit large, so on each of my pupil layers, I'll create a layer mask. And using black paint in my paintbrush, I will mask off that part where it's overlapping my eyelid. I'll have to set my brush opacity back to 100% and paint over that. Do that with each of the pupil layers. And I think you'll agree those eyes look so much better now that we've done that. Let's do a little bit of work on the lips, enhance those a bit. Let's go back to our background layer. And I'm going to select the lips using the polygonal lasso tool. They're a little too faint for me to select it using the quick selection tool. So I'm going to go to my polygonal lasso tool and just trace them. Now I'm making several clicks with my polygonal lasso tool. The more clicks I make, the smoother my line is going to be. I could have also used the pen tool to do this. Now let's drop out the teeth. So I'll hold down the alternate key and click. At this point I can let go of the alternate key or the option key. And now I will be removing the teeth and the gum line from the lip selection. There, so now just the lips are selected. I'm going to feather this selection. So I'll go to my Refine Edge panel, and we're going to feather this. 3 pixels should be fine. Click OK. And I'm going to copy this to a new layer. Back in my Layers panel, we'll just copy that. Control, Alternate, and J. We're going to call it Lips. They're on a new layer. Now the reason I'm doing this is I'm going to change the blending mode of the lips layer. I'll change it from normal to multiply, and now the lips are really much darker. We've gone from one extreme to the other though. They're really too dark, so I just have to pull my layer opacity down probably to about 40%. That should look pretty good. So there's before and after. Now we also lost some of those highlights on the lips, So I'm going to recover those just like I did the catch lights in the eyes. We'll go to our layer effects and choose blending options, and we'll take the underlying layer slider, drag the highlight slider to the right until those highlights come back, and then we will Alt or Option click the right side of that and pull it back a little bit just to get a nice transition. And that looks good. Next, let's soften the skin. I'll go to my background layer and convert that to a smart object. Right click and choose Convert to Smart Object. Next, I'll apply the Dust and Scratches filter to it. Filter, Noise, Dust and Scratches. And we're using this filter again because it's a great way to soften skin and remove minor imperfections. We're going to start out by dragging the radius slider all the way to the left and the threshold slider all the way to the left. Then I'll drag the radius slider to the right a little bit at a time until I see the skin becoming nice and soft. Don't want to do it too much, otherwise you get this really watery looking effect to it. So just what we need to do. I'm thinking probably about 5 pixels will do the trick. Then we take our threshold slider and drag that to the right just until some of those imperfections start to pop up again. And I'm thinking again of probably about 5 levels will do the trick there. And I click OK. There's before and there's after. It's subtle, but if you look carefully, you'll see this. It's important. And of course, since this masked off other parts of the image as well, made them soft, we need to sharpen up those areas once again. I'll zoom out, and on our Smart Filters mask right here, we will paint over that with black paint and our paintbrush the areas that we want to be nice and sharp. The eyes and the surrounding areas. The mouth. The hair. Now you don't have to have all of the hair sharp, but certainly the parts around the eyes would be good. The areas that you want that sharpness back in, you just paint over it. And here you can see the effect on your layer mask thumbnail. Now let's enhance our color. Let's go to the very top of our layer stack, and we're going to create an adjustment layer. This one is going to be for Vibrance. What Vibrance does is it takes colors in the image that are not already saturated and enhances them. You'll also see you've got a saturation slider here as well. I'll start by increasing my saturation a little bit, Don't want to get too carried away with this. Again, we need to work with a gentle touch. So I'm going to increase my saturation. You can see as I do so, the colors are becoming more intense. Again, you don't want to get too crazy with it, but probably I would increase the saturation maybe 15 to 20%. And then the vibrance, we'll take that, and you can drag this up and see what it's doing. It's taking those subtle blues and yellows and making them more intense. Drag it to the left, and it reduces those colors. So I'm going to increase this, again, about 15 to 20%. Before and after. Notice that her eyes are much bluer now, and the blues in the background have come up. And of course, because it creates a layer mask for us automatically, if there's any parts that you don't want that to apply to, you can mask those off. Our next and final step is to do a little bit of rhinoplasty on her. We don't want to get crazy with this, again, because this is a portrait. If I was doing a fashion shoot, I might want to become a little more heavy-handed with what we're going to do, which is use the Liquify filter. But in this particular situation, we don't want to get too crazy with that. I just want to make her nose a little bit smaller. So I'm going to go to the top of my layer stack, and I'm going to merge all these layers. I'm going to press Control, Alternate, Shift, and E, or Command Option Shift and E if you're on the Macintosh. And that merges those layers. I'll call that merged. It preserves all of my original layers and just merges everything together. Next, I'll go to my filter menu and choose Liquify. I can zoom in. And I'm going to make the nose smaller. I needed a brush about this big, just big enough to cover the nose. But what's going to happen is if I shrink the nose now, it's going to distort the lips because it's going to pull those pixels in just as it does the pixels on the nose. So we want to do one thing. We want to make certain, first of all, that you click on the Advanced Mode option here. And when you do that, a couple of additional tools become available to us. We've got the Freeze Mask tool and the Thaw Mask tool. I'm going to go to the Freeze Mask tool, drop my brush size down a little bit, and set your brush density to 100%. And I'm going to paint over her lips. It's going to put a red mask over them. Whatever I paint over is not going to be affected by the Liquify filter. Next, I will go to my Pucker tool. And I'll increase my brush size. And just ever so gently, I'm just going to make her nose a little bit smaller. I'm just clicking and releasing, moving it around a little bit. Again, I don't want to get carried away with it. I just want to make her nose a little bit smaller. The Pucker tool squeezes things in. The Bloat tool makes them puff out. And as we have seen from a previous assignment, the Push Left tool will push an object left if you drag up. It will push it right if you drag down. And because I've masked off the lips, they won't be distorted by the Liquify filter. So I click on OK. And there we have it. I'll turn off the merge layer. You can see before and after. And if you like, we can turn off all of our layers except for the merged layer. all except the background layer anyway. Turn off all my refinements. And then I can toggle on and off my merge layer to see the original image versus the finished one. Dramatic change. Not that the original image was bad, but look how much more appealing it is now. So submit this to me on Blackboard, and I hope you learned a lot from this. And I look forward to talking with you again. This is Mike McCrease.